A cold front stretches across Indiana and Illinois like a steel curtain. The sky is low and heavy. Damp clouds, pierced by streams of icy rain, creep over flat fields, where the sleet turns into a dirty mess. The wind blows from the west, swaying the thin branches of trees and metal signs at the roadside motels. It's the end of October, 1994. Autumn, which does not know what it wants, to be rain or already become winter. An ATR-72 passenger plane is about to rise above this gray world, where the horizon line is almost invisible. A regional turboprop liner, quiet, economical. These are the kind that carry thousands of passengers every day between neighboring states. But today, the sky doesn't look like it's ready to receive them. The cold air mass collides with the warm currents, forming invisible vortices and ice traps. And it is here, at an altitude of 3,000 meters, that nature prepares its test, precise, merciless, and silent. Large snowflakes melt on the warm metal of the fuselage, leaving thin rivulets of water flowing down the American Eagle inscription. Inside there is the smell of coffee, the muffled voices of the crew. The light of the lamps is reflected in the glass of the instruments. Everything seems normal, but it is at such moments that the most terrifying stories are born in aviation. Not because of loud explosions or fires, but because of little things that no one on Earth notices. Below, there are endless cornfields, old gas stations, and wet highways. People are rushing about their business without looking up. No one knows that right now, above them, 1,000 meters from the ground, a story begins that will forever change the rules of icing flights. ATR-72 is lightweight, reliable, European. It is produced by ATR, Avions de Transport Regional, a joint brainchild of France and Italy. It is designed for short routes, where it is not speed that is important, but economy and the ability to board even short lanes. But nature has no timetable, and today she will check what this plane is capable of when the temperature is balancing at zero and the sky is filled with supercool drops. These drops are transparent, invisible, but they contain a hidden force capable of stopping an airplane in the air. The camera goes up. Thick clouds wrap up like boiling steel, and an off-screen voice softly says, "Why does a modern airplane suddenly lose control? What happens when technology collides with nature?" The silhouette of an airplane makes its way through the clouds, its lights flashing in the gray void. A cold front is covering the Midwest, and no one realizes that in an hour this flight will enter the safety textbooks. A gust of wind hits the lens. Raindrops run down the glass. The monotonous sound of the screws turns into a low hum. Ice, water, and air mix in one chaos. And somewhere in this chaos, the answer is already hidden. A small detail that even the manufacturer did not know about. Off-screen pause. Every flight is a balance between science and the elements. And today this balance will be disrupted. The morning of October 31st, 1994 begins like hundreds of others at the Indianapolis airport. The waiting room smells of coffee and kerosene, and the speakers occasionally issue muffled flight announcements. The scoreboard shows dozens of flights to Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati. No one suspects that one of these short flights will become a symbol of change in aviation. On the apron, glistening from the rain, stands an ATR-72 with registration number N401AM, a twin-engine turboprop aircraft designed for 68 people. Its propellers with black blades and yellow tips rotate with a steady hum, as if it is breathing, preparing for departure. This airliner belongs to Simmons Airlines, which operates flights under the American Eagle brand, a regional partner of American Airlines. Passengers are boarding businessmen in gray suits, students with backpacks, and several families. They hide their umbrellas, shaking off the cold drops from them. There are 64 passengers and 4 crew members among them. None of them knows that their flight, designed for only 45 minutes, will last less than an hour, but it will remain in their memory forever. The crew commander, Orlando Aguilar, is 29 years old. Originally from Miami, smiling, with a soft Spanish accent. He has been flying for almost 8,000 hours, of which 1,500 are on this type of aircraft. His colleagues describe him as attentive and calm, the type of pilot who never hurries, always checks everything twice. Next to him is co-pilot Jeffrey Galliana, 30 years old, experienced with more than 5,000 flight hours. He got married recently and just returned from vacation. He loves music, always flies with his own headphones. For him, it's a way to relieve stress when everything goes according to plan. Today, he will control the aircraft, and Aguilar will take over radio communications and parameter control. There are 2 flight attendants working in the passenger cabin. Sandy Madov is the eldest, confident, with a firm intonation, a typical representative of the old American Eagle School. And Amanda Hallberg, the youngest, is only 23 years old. This is her first day at work after studying. She smiles at each passenger, checking her seatbelts and tilting her head to avoid hitting the luggage racks. While the usual bustle sounds in the cabin, leaden clouds are slowly gathering in the sky outside the window. Meteorologists warn that a cold front is passing over the Midwest. At altitudes of over 3,000 meters, icing is expected, one of the most insidious enemies of aviation. Icing is not just ice. These are microscopic droplets of supercooled water that instantly turn into a crust when they come into contact with the wing. Even a layer several millimeters thick can change the shape of the wing, disrupt the airflow, and reduce lift. It's almost invisible on Earth, but it's deadly in the sky. The crew receives a fresh weather forecast. Low clouds, rain with sleet, gusty wind. Thunderstorms are possible. Icing at altitudes above 10,000 feet. This is the usual wording for the end of October, and no one sees it as a threat. The ATR-72 is equipped with rubber anti-icing pads. They inflate and release ice, as if shooting it from the leading edge of the wing. The system is tested and certified. Everything is perfect on paper, but reality rarely matches the instructions. On the runway, wet concrete reflects the lights of the taxiways. The downpour subsides, leaving a fine snow. A message sounds in the control room. Chicago O'Hare Airport is temporarily restricting flight reception due to poor visibility. The crew of Flight 4184 is forced to wait for permission. In the cockpit, the pilots are chatting about the holiday. It's Halloween. Galliana laughs. Sandy, put the pumpkin on the dashboard. Maybe it will help. In response, the commander smiles but keeps an eye on the instruments, pressure arrows, temperature, turbine speeds. Everything is fine. The minutes drag on. There are rare glimmers of light in the sky. A cold front is moving north. At 14:55, the dispatcher gives permission for departure. Aguilar confirms. American Eagle 4184. Takeoff from runway 23 is authorized. The engines switch to takeoff mode. The hum of the turbines increases, and the plane accelerates along the wet runway, leaving a plume of water in its wake. After a few seconds, there is a soft breakaway, a slight vibration, and the ATR gains altitude. In the first minutes, everything is going smoothly. Altitude 3,000 meters, heading northwest towards Chicago. There are smooth lines on the instrument screens. The co-pilot is flying the plane, the autopilot is on. The commander informs the dispatcher. We've passed 10,000, we're going up to 14. Got it. Head straight for Chicago Heights. But the higher the airliner rises, the thicker the clouds become. The drops begin to freeze on the portholes, and a light coating of frost appears on the edge of the wing. In the cockpit, Aguilar can be heard saying softly, I see a slight icing. Turn on the system. A flip of the toggle switch and the rubber pads begin to work, knocking the ice off the wing. From the outside, the plane looks calm, but a few kilometers away, the pilot of the other side, a Beechcraft Baron, informs the dispatcher. There's light icing at an altitude of 3,700 and ice on the glass. This is the first signal that the front is strengthening. The ATR-72 reaches the echelon. Gray fields and roads remain below, along which the glare of the headlights runs. The cabin is filled with the steady hum of engines. No one knows that this ordinary flight will soon turn into a textbook on aerodynamics and human error. Nature does not give warnings. She's just waiting for someone to cross her line. The plane leaves the cloud layer at an altitude of about 4,000 meters. There is a solid white veil outside the windows, and it seems as if the world under the wings has simply disappeared. No horizon, no sun, just the cold milk of clouds, where the sound of engines is muffled by humid air. The ATR-72 is heading northwest. Everything is going according to plan. There is calmness in the cabin. Co-pilot Galliana holds the steering wheel with one hand, tapping his fingers on the panel as usual. Autopilot is on, all parameters are stable. Commander Aguilar is closely monitoring the instruments, checking the data and the time of arrival. The radio is working normally, short phrases, jerky commands, numbers, frequencies. Everything seems predictable. But behind the porthole, a process is already underway that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Supercooled water droplets suspended in clouds collide with a wing that is moving at a speed of more than 400 kilometers per hour. Each drop instantly crystallizes when touched, turning into ice. This ice does not accumulate randomly. It creeps along the surface like a thin crust, starting from the leading edge and spreading back. For understanding, the aerodynamic profile of an airplane wing is designed so that the air passing over it creates a low pressure zone. It is she who forms the lifting force, the one that keeps the plane in the air. When the ice changes the shape of the wing, even by millimeters, the airflow stops being smooth. Microvortices appear, and the force that is supposed to lift begins to collapse. This is the beginning of icing, and it happens imperceptibly. The indicators on the panel are silent because the de-icing system is working. The rubber shoes on the leading edge of the wings inflate every few minutes, knocking off the ice. This is a routine procedure for the crew. There are hundreds of such flights. At 15:09, the pilots hear a message on the air. Beechcraft Baron reports light icing at an altitude of 12,000 feet. Aguilar glances briefly at Galliana. Apparently, we're going to be covered in rain now. Check the screw heating system. He answers calmly. Everything is on, the temperature is holding up. The heating indicators light up on the panel, green lights, confirming that the system is active. There are smooth lines on the autopilot displays. Everything is under control. The wings are covered with light frost on the outside. Nothing unusual, but an invisible struggle is already beginning behind this thin film. The microlayer of water freezes behind the zone where the rubber pads do not reach. The designers could not have foreseen that there would be drops of this size in the clouds. Large, heavy, like microdrops of rain, capable of sticking to metal like glue. The ATR-72 is gaining an altitude of 16,000 feet, approximately 4,900 meters. The wind is picking up, the plane is shaking slightly. The commander contacts the dispatcher of the Denville sector. Eagle 4184, passing 16,000, request for 10,000 due to icing. Eagle 184, copy that, occupy and hold 10,000 feet. A smooth descent begins. At this time, the usual working rhythm still reigns in the cabin. Aguilar keeps records. Galliana adjusts the autopilot by switching communication channels. The only sound is the rhythmic whine of the screws and the occasional click of the toggle switches. As the liner descends, the structure of the clouds changes overboard. The temperature is approaching zero, the humidity is almost 100%. These are ideal conditions for icing. The ice builds up faster than the system can knock it down. Small protrusions resembling frozen droplets form on the edge of the wing. Under normal conditions, they are harmless, but it is here, in the waiting area, where the plane is forced to fly in a circle at the same altitude, that it becomes a trap. The icing system knocks down the ice only at the leading edge, where the rubber sections are installed. But the airflow moves further along the surface, and a cold zone remains behind them, where the ice clings again, growing layer by layer. At 1517, the dispatcher reports, Eagle 4184, due to the congestion at Chicago Airport, you will be held at 10,000 feet. The waiting time is approximately 30 minutes. Understood, we're holding you. Flying turns into a routine. The aircraft makes wide turns, maintaining altitude. The co-pilot puts music in his headphones, quiet jazz, barely audible under the hum of the engines. The commander jokes with the flight attendant over the intercom. They discuss that there will be a late lunch at the hotel after boarding. It's raining on Earth at this time. It's -5 in the sky. The humidity is saturated with supercooled droplets, and every minute an invisible but dangerous layer grows on the wings. The ATR-72 is a reliable but sensitive aircraft. Its wings are shorter than those of jetliners, and the aerodynamics are designed for lower speeds. This makes it vulnerable to any profile changes. Even a small amount of ice can shift the balance. The commander glances at the readings of the trimmers, devices that help stabilize the position of the aircraft. His nose starts to lift up a little, and Aguilar says softly, "Do you feel it?" It's like he's being pulled up a little bit. Yes, it's strange. It feels like it's waddling. There may be ice on the stabilizer. We're holding it for now. Let's see what happens next. These short phrases conceal the main contrast of flight. Outwardly, everything is calm, but physics is already working against them. In the clouds, where nothing but a dense gray mass is visible, the plane is traveling smoothly along the route, but its aerodynamics have already changed. There are still green indicators on the panel, but behind them is physics, which doesn't care about the light bulbs. The ATR-72 continues to maintain altitude, making smooth turns. The wind blows the plane away, and the autopilot compensates for the drift. The metal case is shaking. The screws are cutting the air with effort. The crew is confident that the system is coping, but no one sees the ice that grows outside the de-icing pads. It's an icy shadow, and it's already stretching across the wing. At an altitude of 10,000 feet, the aircraft enters a stable waiting area. There are dense clouds all around, and only rare gaps in the gray wall allow you to see a strip of land flash for a moment under the wing. Then everything is covered with white mist again. The ATR makes a wide left turn, then a right turn, and gets back on course. Round and round, as if stuck between the layers of the atmosphere. There is silence in the cabin. The co-pilot, Galliana, turned on quiet music in his headphones, and the rhythm of jazz, light and relaxed, barely makes its way into the microphone. Commander Aguilar checks the air temperature, then looks at the warning lights of the de-icing system. Everything is green. Everything is working. The system inflates the rubber pads on the leading edge of the wing every 3 minutes, knocking down the formed ice. Visually, everything is in order. The skin is clean. There is no vibration. The plane is on course. But the outside is a completely different picture. Large supercooled droplets, which should not be present in this altitude range, fall on the surface of the wing. Some of them freeze and fall off, but the other sticks to the area behind the de-icing pad. Exactly where the system is missing, millimeter by millimeter, the ice builds up further, in the area where the wing's aerodynamics are most sensitive. If you look at the wing in the section, it looks like the surgical precision of nature. The leading edge is clean, and behind it there is a protrusion like a teardrop-shaped growth. It changes the profile of the wing, shifting the center of pressure back. It is almost imperceptible, but it is precisely such shifts that can destroy the balance. The ATR continues to circle. The vibration increases with each turn, but the crew perceives this as turbulence. She's a regular on days like this. Aguilar leans forward slightly, looks at the temperature sensor, -5 Celsius. He sees no point in climbing higher. It's even colder there, and ice will form faster. Staying here is the best option. After 20 minutes of waiting, an invisible layer had already formed on the wings. Thin but dense like glass, the same pattern is seen on the tail stabilizer. The heating system operates in a cycle, 50 seconds of inflation, then pause. During the pause, the drops have time to freeze again. This is a race in which the plane is gradually starting to lose. The passengers in the cabin don't notice anything. Someone is sleeping, someone is reading a newspaper. Amanda, the junior flight attendant, pours coffee for an elderly couple in the 5th row. She smiles, unaware that their plane is now covered with a fingernail-thick crust of ice. Sandy checks her seatbelts, a routine procedure. At this moment, their liner looks perfect. But this is an illusion. A short conversation is heard in the cockpit. "Guy, our nose is turning up at turns. Yes, I feel like I'm waddling. Maybe we should release the flaps by 15. This will reduce the lift and cause the nose to drop. Come on, just be careful." A click. Flaps are released. At the same moment, an alarm sounds. A sharp sound tone that interrupts the steady hum of the engines. A warning lights up on the panel. Config is a non-flying configuration. This means that the flaps are released at too high a speed. "Automatic trimmers?" Galliana asks. "Yes, it's fine," Aguilar replies, although there is tension in his voice. For a moment, the plane shudders slightly, as if it has been pushed from the outside. The autopilot compensates for the roll, returning the car to the course. Everything calms down. The cabin is quiet again. The co-pilot takes a deep breath, puts the headphones back on. Everything seems to be under control. But in fact, control has already been lost. Ice continues to accumulate, especially on the back of the wing, behind the rubber pads. Engineers did not consider this area to be critical. In laboratory conditions, no significant icing was observed there during aircraft certification. But then they used small water droplets, such as are found in ordinary clouds. No one has tested how the aircraft will behave in larger droplets, the so-called supercooled large droplets, supercooled large diameter droplets. It is in such conditions that the ATR-72 is currently located. Each drop hits the metal, spreads, and freezes. This ice, like a parasite, grows against the aerodynamics. The instruments do not record deviations, because the air pressure and temperature remain within the normal range. But physics has already begun to destroy the symmetry of flight. Another 10 minutes pass. The crew reports to the dispatcher. Eagle 4184 holds 10,000. Conditions are moderate icing. Understood. Continue holding. At that moment, everything looks routine. But every next circle is a step towards the edge. The ATR makes a new turn, and at that moment the nose rises slightly higher than usual. The commander compensates by slightly pushing the steering wheel forward. The reaction is delayed. He frowns but doesn't pay attention. The ice on the stabilizer has already begun to disrupt the balance of longitudinal stability. It's as if the tail of the plane has become heavier by several tens of kilograms. This is enough to upset the perfect balance. There is silence outside. Only the wind and the snow which sticks to the metal. The camera seems to be approaching the wing. A matte coating is visible which does not reflect light. It's not just frost. This is ice that cannot be knocked down by either rubber pads or vibration. In the cockpit, the pilots sit in the semi-darkness of the instruments, illuminated by a soft green light. There is only a gray sky outside the window. No signs of trouble. But at that moment, the catastrophe had already begun. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, with a thickness of 2 millimeters of ice. The world behind the glass seems to be stationary, and the plane, which seems submissive, is already fighting the laws of physics. Almost 40 minutes in the waiting area. The plane continues to fly in a vicious circle, smoothly, predictably, as if stuck in time. At an altitude of 10,000 feet, everything looks calm. The steady hum of engines, light vibrations, and the glow of instruments. But inside this apparent calm, a chain reaction has already begun. At some point, the commander leans forward slightly. He feels like the plane has become heavier on the nose. There are slight fluctuations in the pitch angle on the instruments, literally 2 or 3 degrees, but Aguilar notices them. "Do you feel it?" he says softly. "Yes, it's like he's being bullied." Galliana answers, looking at the air horizon. "Maybe we should check the trimmers?" "On the machine. It's the same as always." Still sounds calm. They continue the conversation, unaware that the balance of aerodynamics has been disrupted right now. Ice accumulated on the edges of the wings, shifting the center of pressure. The aircraft tries to lift the nose, compensating for the loss of lift, but this only increases the resistance. The autopilot, without having a physical sense of the car, works as usual. It corrects micro-movements, keeping the horizon. He doesn't realize that he's struggling with real air resistance. At this point, the ice that cannot be shed comes into play. The airflow over the surface of the wing changed, and the right wing began to give slightly less lift than the left. The difference is negligible, only a few kilograms of thrust, but it's enough for an airplane to start an imperceptible roll. Aguilar looks at the instruments. The aircraft horizon shows a deviation of 5 degrees to the right. He adjusts the steering wheel slightly, and the plane levels out. A few seconds later, a slight roll again, but now a little stronger. It's strange, something's wrong with the right wing. Yes, it's like it's running out. Maybe turbulence? Maybe. They don't know that the control rods that connect the control stick to the ailerons, the movable elements of the wing responsible for roll, are now frozen inside the wing. The ice has changed the movement of the air so much that the flow is now pressing on these surfaces with unexpected force. At 15:56, the dispatcher transmits on the radio. Eagle 4184, descend and hold at 8,000 feet. Copy that, we're going down to 8. The headboard reduces the power, sets the vertical speed. The autopilot is descending. Everything is according to the procedure. But after a few seconds, the commander notices that the aircraft horizon is again veering to the right. At first, it's 15 degrees. He's frowning. The autopilot is reacting strangely. Yes, it looks like it leads to the right. Try to align it manually. He turns off the autopilot. A short beep, a sharp click. Now the control is completely in the hands of the pilots. The steering wheel is shaking, resisting. The plane behaves unnaturally. The right wing seems to be pulling down. I got it. You can hear it in the recording. Level it up. Be careful. The reaction of the aircraft is delayed. The roll is increasing 20, 30, 40 degrees. Galliana tries to compensate, but the ailerons respond late. Every movement of the steering wheel feels like resistance. The metal is shaking. What for? He won't listen. Autopilot is off. I'm holding it manually. Calm down, straighten up. At this moment, the first alarm sounds. A short, electronic, with a characteristic beep. The indicators on the panel light up. Stall. A warning about the disruption of the flow. This means that the wings lose their ability to generate lift. It can't be. Our speed is normal. Aguilar shouts, looking at the device. The speed is normal, but it is falling. Indeed, the speed according to the instruments is 180 knots. This is not a stall mode. But the speed sensors are powered by pressure receivers that are iced over. They show incorrect data. The actual speed is already lower than needed for steady flight. The first seconds of losing control always look chaotic. The plane enters a right bank, then abruptly levels off, then goes back to the right but deeper. The sound of the engines changes, the revs rise, then fall. Kid, we've got a big roll. I'm trying to level up. Don't lift your nose up. It will get worse. I got it. The video reconstructions show this moment in slow motion. The nose of the plane rises slightly, then drops sharply. The roll goes beyond the limit of 70 degrees. There is an almost vertical line on the air horizon. 77 degrees to the right. We're falling. I got it. Come on, straighten up. Autopilot is off. Manual control. The sound of the alarm merges with the hum of the engines. The vibration is getting stronger. The plane literally rotates around its axis. Everything in the cabin is shaking, the steering wheel, the instruments, even the chairs. I'm losing control. Pull. Level it up. He's not responding. 36 seconds after the start of the roll, the ATR-72 falls in a spiral. The altitude is decreasing catastrophically fast, more than 3,000 feet in half a minute. This means that every 2 seconds the plane loses 100 meters. A blurry white mass flashes behind the glass. No land is visible, just a gray swirl. Galliana instinctively pulls the steering wheel towards herself, but this only worsens the situation. When the flow is disrupted, the wing stops holding, and the plane falls even deeper. The commander is trying to stabilize the position using the rudder, but the ice deposits on the tail have already deprived him of effectiveness. Trimmer. The nose is going away. I can't feel the controls. Autopilot is disabled. Everything is done manually. He won't listen. The warning system emits a continuous warning signal about a dangerous angle of attack. The light panels are blinking. The cabin is filled with red and yellow lights. It's a blizzard outside. At a speed of almost 600 km/h, the liner falls down, rotating. At this point, the internal congestion becomes such that passengers cannot move. Everything is happening fast, but for the crew, time seems to have stretched. Come on, here you go. Level it up. I'm trying. He won't listen. He just won't listen. The last recording from the flight recorder is the sound of a powerful impact on the steering wheel. After that, there is a sharp break in the signal, then silence. No one on Earth knows what happened yet. Pause fills the airwaves. The dispatcher calls the board several times. Eagle 4184, confirm the reduction to 8,000. Eagle 4184, are you in touch? There is no response. The marker disappears on radar screens. In a few seconds, the ATR-72 loses everything: altitude, orientation, and control. The flight, which began as a routine procedure, ends with an impact on the ground near Roselawn, Indiana, at a speed of about 600 kilometers per hour. After that, nothing remains, no visible debris, no whole structures. Just a field, quiet and wet from the rain, where the snow falls, muffling the sound of the wind. The world is becoming quiet again, and only the dispatcher, looking at the radar screen, realizes that one of the tags has disappeared forever. The silence before the storm. At 15 hours, 56 minutes and 28 seconds, the American Eagle 4184 begins its last turn in the waiting area. Everything still seems to be under control. The instruments are in the green zone, the autopilot is stable, the crew is confident that the situation is under control. On the recording of the flight recorder, only light breathing, the creaking of the chair, and the quiet hum of the engines can be heard. No one knows that in a few seconds a breakdown will begin that cannot be stopped. 15 degrees to the right. The voice is calm, almost casual. Galliana slightly adjusts the steering wheel, compensating for the roll. The autopilot is behaving strangely. Turn it off. Let's do it manually. A click. A short beep of disconnection. From that moment on, the plane lives its own life. 15 hours, 56 minutes, and 36 seconds. ATR is on the decline. The altitude is about 9,500 feet. The right wing console loses its aerodynamic shape. There is a layer of ice on it, less than a centimeter thick, but this is enough for the airflow to break. The wing stops generating lift. There is a 25 degrees deviation on the air horizon. The commander is trying to level up. The steering wheel is shaking, giving into the hands, as if the mechanism inside is stuck in metal. I got it. Steady up. The voice is tense, but don't panic. It also seems like you can handle it. 15 hours, 56 minutes, and 43 seconds. The roll is rising. 40 degrees. Then 55 degrees. The plane begins to glide through the air like a piece of paper caught in the wind. Boy, he's waddling. I got it. The sound becomes denser, as if the air itself is beginning to contract. The camera seems to freeze. The screws rotate at blinding speed, but visually everything seems to slow down. 15 hours, 56 minutes, and 47 seconds. The roll is 77 degrees, practically on its side. The wing, covered with ice, no longer holds. The air does not flow around the surface, it breaks off. This is the moment when the plane loses its ability to fly. Stall. A voice signal sounds. The synthetic female voice of the warning system repeats the word over and over again. Stall. Pilots instinctively pull the steering wheel towards themselves, a reaction developed over years of training. But in such circumstances, this is a mistake. The flow has already been disrupted, and any upward movement increases the angle of attack, finally killing the lifting force. The plane turns over to the right, nose dips down. The fall begins. 15 hours, 56 minutes, and 51 seconds. Vertical speed is increasing, minus 3,000 feet per minute. Lights are flashing on the panel, indicating overload, speed, and angle of attack. The steering wheel vibrates as if alive, trying to escape from his hands. The trimmer. Give me the trimmer. He's not responding. Hold it. Don't let go. The commander's voice breaks. Galliana shouts something, but the words are muffled by the noise of the engines. The cabin is shaking. All the lamps on the panel merge into a continuous stream of light. 15 hours, 56 minutes, and 56 seconds. ATR goes into a dive. The angle is more than 45 degrees. The speed increases to 250 knots, then 280. The air rushes into screams, hitting the hull. The noise becomes deafening. There are clouds below, gray, dense, without a gap. No land is visible, only the frantic rotation of the horizon, which flashes through the windows. Sky, clouds, a moment of light, darkness again. Level up. Level it up. I'm trying. He won't listen. In the video reconstructions, this moment looks like a crazy dance. The plane rotates, the tail wobbles, the stabilizer breaks out of the stream. But inside the cabin, everything has already been decided. Mechanics versus physics. 15 hours, 57 minutes, and 2 seconds. The altitude is 6,000 feet. The fall continues. The engine speeds reach their maximum. The propellers squeal, but it doesn't help. The angle of attack exceeds the critical one. The air ceases to be an ally, it becomes an enemy. Come on, hold it. Here you go. I got it. Can't. He's going to the right. Left. Pull left. There is no effect. Nothing is working. The voices merge into one continuous stream of tension. The sound of the recorder captures not words, but the noise of a struggle, breathing, banging on the panel, metal screeching. 15 hours, 57 minutes, and 10 seconds. The altitude is 3,000 feet. The ATR is falling at a vertical velocity of about 10,000 feet per minute. It's almost 180 kilometers per hour down. There are flashes of light outside, lightning in the clouds, reflected in the wet metal. Inside, there is a chaos of devices flashing at all levels. The alarm sound becomes a constant, continuous beep that cannot be silenced. Hold on. We're falling. Pull. Level it up. I'm trying. We have no control. 15 hours, 57 minutes, and 18 seconds. The pilots see the ground. Through the breaks in the clouds, a dark green field, road lines, and roofs of houses in the distance flash by. But the height is already too low. Pull. Pull. He won't listen. That's it. The last seconds turn into a slow-motion frame. The steering wheel is up to the stop. The instruments are flashing. The sound of the siren covers everything. 77 degrees roll. 600 kilometers per hour. The Earth is getting closer. 15 hours, 57 minutes, and 24 seconds. Dense clap of air, characteristic of a high-speed flow. A sharp squeak and silence. The screen goes blank. Just the sound of the wind, the rain, and the shot. A wide field under Indiana, wet, gray, empty. Fine snow is falling from the sky, which falls on top of the fresh furrows in the ground. The camera goes up. In the distance, there are the lights of the road, rare cars, and a quiet sky that seems calm again. 36 seconds. That's how long the journey took from the first roll to the end. No fire, no explosion, no chance. Only aerodynamics, physics, and ice are the very ice that changed the history of this aircraft. There was absolute silence after the impact. Only the rain is pounding on the remains of the fuselage, scattered across a field near Roselawn, Indiana. It smells of wet earth, kerosene, and metal. There is nothing in place that resembles an airplane. Just debris, small, as if they were crushed into dust. It took rescuers several hours to realize the scale. The impact was so strong that the ATR-72 literally disappeared into the ground. When the first National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, investigators arrive at the site, the field looks like a giant sinkhole. The length of the scattering of debris is about 250 meters. Pieces of skin, fragments of the cabin, and remnants of propeller blades are scattered around the radius. Not a single whole element. Even the engines went deep into the ground. The investigation begins immediately. A catalog is created for each element. Numbering, photos, coordinates. Everything is fixed. The angle of deformation, the direction of the cut, traces of carbon deposits. NTSB engineers are methodically reconstructing the trajectory of the fall bit by bit. A few days later, 2 key elements are delivered to a special warehouse in Washington: a parametric recorder, FDR, and a speech recorder, CVR. Both devices are seriously damaged. but NTSB laboratory specialists are able to work with such material. The FDR case is opened like a safe with diamond cutters. Inside are microscopic coils with data encoded on magnetic tape. All that's left of the last flight. The first seconds of playback are a flat line of data. Then there are sudden jumps, speed, pitch, roll angle. And finally, the very point where the system records 77 degrees deviations. From that moment on, the schedule turns into chaos. In parallel, engineers decode the CVR. The sound is processed, noise is removed, and voices are restored. What they hear shocks even experienced professionals. The last 30 seconds, fighting, commands, sirens. No panic, no screams. Only desperate attempts to regain control. After that, a sharp break. According to the parametric recorder, all systems were functioning normally until the last second. The engines were running, the fuel was fine, the hydraulics did not fail. The autopilot turned off manually. This ruled out any version of a technical breakdown. This means that the reason was something else, an external impact or an aerodynamic factor. Investigators are examining the wreckage of the wing. There are characteristic traces of icing on the leading edge. But the strangest thing is that the ice was found behind the de-icing pads, in an area where the protection system did not physically reach. This confirms the assumption. Ice formed in places where ATR engineers had not even imagined its existence. American experts conclude that during the flight, a supercooled large droplets zone was formed, an area with large supercooled water droplets that, when they collide with the surface, do not have time to freeze instantly. They spread out and turn into ice outside the heated edge. This means that the design of the ATR-72 wing did not envisage such a scenario. One of the NTSB engineers writes in the report, "The de-icing system was working properly, but the ice formed in the area where it is powerless. The plane was losing aerodynamics, remaining instrument perfect. This discovery shocked the manufacturers. Representatives of ATR, Avions de Transport Regional, have arrived in France to conduct their own analyses. They did not agree with the conclusion of the American side. French experts claimed that the plane lost control not because of icing, but because of the wrong actions of the crew. According to their version, the pilots violated the instructions by releasing the flaps by 15 degrees at too high a speed, which could cause excessive load on the control system. In response, the NTSB states, "Even if the flaps were released prematurely, this does not explain the sudden and sharp roll to 77 degrees. Such a maneuver is possible only with an asymmetric loss of lift, and this is a direct consequence of icing." The dispute escalates into an international conflict. The American side accuses ATR and European aviation certification bodies of negligence. After all, when issuing the certificate for the ATR-72 in 1989, icing tests were carried out only in the range of small droplets, up to 40 microns. No one has tested the wing's response to drops with a diameter of 100 microns or more, typical of winter thunderstorms and freezing rain. The French side responds that the aircraft complied with all international standards. However, it soon turns out that during certification tests at the base in Istres, France, ATR engineers did not complete the test program related to tail icing. This data has been labeled as non-threatening. When the investigators look up the technical reports, they find a record made several years before the disaster. It was found that with prolonged exposure to freezing rain, plaque may form outside the heated area. No additional tests were conducted. This suggestion was the key to the investigation. Everything pointed to a systemic problem. The ATR wing design did not provide full protection when flying in conditions of intense icing. The NTSB concludes that the immediate cause was the loss of control due to a disruption in the flow caused by icing behind the de-icing area. The accompanying factors are Insufficient awareness of the crew about the possible features of the aircraft's behavior in such conditions, and the lack of precise recommendations in the operating instructions for actions when signs of large-scale icing appear. Meanwhile, the French Bureau of BEA publishes its report. It focuses on the human factor. According to their version, the destruction of the control mechanism could be caused by exceeding the permissible speed with the flaps released. Allegedly, the pilots exceeded the limit by 20 knots, which could lead to damage to the aileron thrust joints. But an analysis of the FDR data shows that the excess was minimal, no more than 5 knots, which could not cause destruction. In addition, the ailerons reacted to commands until the very end, which ruled out their mechanical malfunction. As a result, the NTSB issues a final report which clearly states, the main reason is loss of control as a result of aerodynamic changes caused by icing of the wing outside the protection zone. The culprits are the shortcomings of certification and the design features of the aircraft. In fact, it was a verdict not on the pilots, but on the system. After the crash of Flight 4184, a large-scale inspection of all ATR-42 and ATR-72 operating in the United States began. The engineers found that such cases could have happened before, just without tragic consequences. As a result, the manufacturer was forced to make major changes to the wing design. De-icing pads were increased, drainage channels were redesigned, and coating materials were changed. Later, these modifications were called the Enhanced Ice Protection Kit, an improved anti-icing kit. The crash of Flight 4184 sent a signal to the entire industry. Flight certificates could no longer be issued according to the old standards. After that, the FAA and the European agency ESA revised the testing procedures, adding mandatory tests in large supercooled droplets. And at the NTSB headquarters, on the wall in the boardroom, they later hung a quote from the case report. Sometimes ice doesn't just settle on the wings. It settles on a system that thinks it's secure. In the NTSB's final report, the lines are as dry as formulas, but behind them are thousands of hours of hypothesis testing and sorting through details. The reason is very clear. Loss of controllability due to changes in wing aerodynamics during icing outside the protection zone. Related factors include in-flight procedural decisions and gaps in certification testing. The main idea of the report is that there is more than one mistake. This is a combination of several elements, each of which is not critical individually, but together they throw the car off balance. In the meeting room of the commission, telemetry printouts are flipping through roll angle, vertical speed, aileron position. The graphs resemble an electrocardiogram, a smooth line, then a sharp peak, and then only a drop in parameters into the red zone. On the screen are fragments of the ATR-72 wing with marks exactly where the ice crust was formed. A narrow, clean strip on the leading edge, followed by a protrusion of ice that ate away at the profile of its lifting shape. The engineers carefully lift the mock-up, demonstrating how the airflow breaks not at the edge, but already behind it, where the system of shoes does not work physically. On another table, the certification documents are laid out. The old standards allowed modeling icing by small droplets in the cloud. Large, drop zones, icy rain, and supercooled large, diameter droplets were described in climatology, but were not included in the mandatory tests. It's like teaching an athlete to run on a flat track and put him on the ice. Technically he's ready, actually he's not. The American report clearly indicates that the critical combination consists of 3 components. Aerodynamics, ice formed behind the shield, changing the profile and shifting the center of pressure. The right wing began to give less lift, which triggered a right bank and disrupted the flow. Procedures. Flying in the waiting area at the same altitude in a moisture-saturated layer increased the contact time with icing conditions. The introduction of flaps at speeds close to the thresholds for a clean wing, without taking into account the degradation of aerodynamics, reduced the margin of stability. Certification. The tests did not cover flight in a large drop environment. The operating manuals did not provide strict recommendations for early exit from the zone and configuration management in case of signs of SLD icing. The French Bureau of BEA publishes a parallel document. It focuses on the human factor and exceeding speed limits when flaps are released. The commissions argue about the primary reasons, but everyone agrees on one thing: designs, rules, and training must change. This is a rare case when the industry recognizes that nature has turned out to be broader than our model of the world. Next, work without cameras. ATR engineering workshops are cutting new edge samples, changing the geometry and increasing the area of the rubber shoes on the wing and stabilizer, refining the drainage, recalculating the stiffness of the elements in order to shift the boundary of the occurrence of a breakdown. In parallel, there are program bulletins for airlines. New minimum speeds in day, icing, earlier activation of de-icing, a ban on holding in areas with signs of SLD, a review of autopilot modes and recommendations to turn it off earlier if the behavior of the car starts to get stuck. There is a long row of injectors on the test site. They do not spray fog, but heavy water. They simulate large drops that occur in the real sky at the junction of fronts. The testers carry out protocols with deliberately strict parameters. Low temperatures, high humidity, multi-cycle rise reset, maneuvers at high angles, combinations of flaps and speeds. The task is simple: to reproduce what was beyond the line of the old norms and move this line far ahead. The FAA and European agencies are changing the rules of the game themselves. Certification guidelines are being updated, separate profiles for large drop icing are being introduced, test areas are being expanded, and aircraft behavior is required to be checked during prolonged stays in saturated layers and during maneuvers. Next to the technical updates, there is also a human part: the revision of CRM and cabin procedures in difficult weather. In the training centers, a new icing reminder is being run on the stands. Recognition of SLD by indirect signs, uneven plaque, deterioration of reaction to the steering wheel, increased vibrations, early departure from the zone without trading time, the pace of shoe cycles, more often and in advance, increased VREF/VAP in icing, use smaller flap releases and later, autopilot, only with absolute stability, signs of viscosity, immediate manual operation. New training modules are being opened. The simulator no longer studies only the film dumping on a clean wing. The crews are shown how the stall in the icing looks different. Not dramatically, but viscous, as if someone is imperceptibly pulling the blanket of aerodynamics from one wing to another. He learns to recognize early markers: an unusual need for trimming, weak aileron recoil, unfair speed readings with icy receivers. This is not heroism. This is a discipline where the right step 3 minutes earlier means more than any last centimeters on the ground. At the same time, the culture of dispatching services is also changing. Stricter protocols are being introduced to keep aircraft at levels with known SLD zones, priority exits from waiting, updated texts of recommendations for crews on routes where freezing rain is a frequent visitor. Where before they said, "Let's wait 20 minutes," now it sounds, "Leave the layer, report the status." From the outside, it all looks unnoticeable. Planes, as before, take off and land. There's another world inside. Additional lines appear in the checklists, new speed tables appear in the FCOM, and refinements for icing sensors appear in the MEL. In e-courses, there are videos with visualizations of the flow, where the thin crust behind the edge is visible as a scar on the profile. In briefings, it's a new habit to ask yourself the question, what about the layer ahead? If you decompose the entire journey after October 31st, 1994 into steps, you get a long chain of small changes. None of them makes the sky safe by itself, but all together they shift the probability. What could have developed into a critical situation earlier is now more often recognized when approaching the border. And the crew leaves the layer earlier, and the autopilot is turned off on time, and the flaps are inserted with a new margin, and de-icing is turned on not after the fact, but according to the forecast. ATR engineers in the workshop check the finished wings with an increased protection zone. FAA technical observers put their signature in the corresponds column, and in the classroom the instructor flips through a slide on a tablet with a short inscription. SLD is not exotic, but a variant of the norm. This phrase sounds casual, but it's just being casual that saves you. When a rule becomes a habit becomes a reflex, and reflex works where there's no time to think. And yet there is a human ending to this story. He's not talking about loud speeches. It's about the value of mindfulness of small things. The thin crust of ice, which the pilots could not see from their seat, became the beginning of the chain, and then the chain itself changed the industry. It's not a defeat, it's a feedback loop. This is how aviation has always learned. To identify a weak link, strengthen it, recalculate it, check it again, and make sure that the next crew does not even notice where the border once was. The camera returns to the night sky. There's another plane on the glide path. Vasy lights show the right way, white and red, like a metronome that calms down. The landing gear is released, the speed is stable, the wind is steady. The voices in the cockpit are short and clear. Speed is stable, course is stable, landing is allowed. At the bottom, the stripes reflect the light like a mirror, and it seems that the earth itself helps. The voiceover drops to almost a whisper. There are no small things in aviation. Every detail is a matter of life.